My name is Claire Dawson. I'm 31 years old. 3 years ago, my parents handed my older brother the keys to a beautiful restaurant in downtown Chicago. Then my father looked at me and slid a different set of keys across the table. Old, scratched, covered in rust. "The diner is yours," he said. "It's been losing money for years. If anyone can keep it alive," he shrugged. "Well, at least you'll try." My brother laughed. "Dad, just sell the place. Nobody stops there anymore." My mother smiled at him. "Leave your sister alone." Then she turned to me. "You'll understand someday." Understand what? That I wasn't worth investing in? That every dream I'd ever had was somehow smaller than my brother's? I wanted to ask. Instead, I picked up the keys, smiled, and said, "Thank you." Nobody noticed my hands were shaking. 3 years later, those same people stood outside my diner asking me to save everything they had left. They expected me to say yes. They had no idea what had happened inside those walls, or what they had turned me into. Everything began on a rainy Tuesday in April. The diner sat just off Highway 34. Most people drove past without slowing down. The sign hadn't worked in years. Half the letters were burned out. The parking lot was cracked. The paint was peeling off the walls. Inside, there were exactly 6 tables, 4 red booths, a coffee machine older than I was, and one woman waiting for me. She looked about 65, gray hair tied into a loose bun, white apron, coffee mug in her hands. She stood as I walked in. "So, you must be Claire," I nodded. "And you are?" She smiled. "Martha. I've worked here for 38 years. 38. Longer than I'd been alive." She looked around the empty diner before speaking again. "I was wondering who your parents would send." I forced a smile. "Looks like they sent the wrong person." She shook her head immediately. "No. They sent the last person willing to try." Those words stayed with me, because deep down, I knew exactly why my parents had given me the diner. Not because they believed in me, because they believed it was already dead. Martha walked behind the counter and poured me a cup of coffee. "It isn't very good," she admitted. "The machine should have been replaced 10 years ago." I took a sip. She wasn't exaggerating. It tasted burnt. She laughed when she saw my face. "Now you know why truck drivers only order pie." I looked around again. The place felt frozen in time. Old photographs hung crooked on the walls. A faded newspaper clipping read, "Dawson's Diner celebrates 40 years. My last name." I pointed at it. "My grandparents?" She nodded. "They built this place from nothing. They knew every customer by name." She looked at me. "Your father never wanted the diner. He wanted bigger things." That surprised me. He told me this place was the family's first business. It was. But once the restaurant in Chicago became successful, she shrugged. This place stopped mattering. I ran my fingers across one of the empty tables. "So why didn't they sell it?" Martha smiled sadly. "They tried. No one wanted it." Silence filled the room. Finally, she said, "Claire, can I tell you something?" "Of course. If you're here to make quick money, you'll leave disappointed. But if you're here because you want people to feel welcome, this little diner might surprise you." The first week was worse than I expected. On Monday, 3 customers. Tuesday, 5. Wednesday, 2. Thursday, not 1. I spent more money keeping the lights on than I earned serving food. At night, I sat alone with spreadsheets. Every number told the same story. 3 more months, maybe 4. Then the diner would run out of money. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my brother. I didn't want pity. Or worse. I didn't want to hear, "We told you so." A month later, my brother Ethan stopped by. Not to help, just to look around. He stepped inside wearing an expensive tailored coat. His car probably cost more than the entire kitchen. He looked around and laughed. "You actually stayed." "I said I would." He glanced at the menu. "Burgers? Pancakes? Meatloaf?" He smirked. "You know people don't drive across the state for meatloaf anymore." Martha walked out of the kitchen carrying fresh pie. She placed it on the counter without saying a word. Ethan looked at her. "And you still work here?" She smiled politely. "I do." "For what?" He looked around. "Sentimental value." I saw Martha's smile disappear for just a second. Then she answered calmly. "For people." He laughed. "That's cute. Before leaving, he stopped beside me. You know, Dad's thinking about selling the land, I frowned. What land? The one under the diner. My heart stopped. He can't. He owns it. He can. I stared at him. He gave me the diner. He gave you the business. Ethan smiled. He never gave you the property. Then he walked out. The bell above the front door rang once, and the diner became completely silent. I looked at Martha. Please tell me he's lying. She didn't answer. She simply looked down. That was answer enough. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the money, not because of the empty tables, but because I finally understood something. My parents hadn't given me a second chance. They'd given me a business, without the land beneath it. And if they sold that land, everything I'd built, everything I was trying to save, could disappear overnight. I sat up in bed at 3 a.m, opened my notebook, and wrote one sentence. Nobody is taking this place from me. For the first time. This wasn't about proving my family wrong. It was about protecting the first thing that had ever truly become mine. She was right. Nobody was taking this place from me, not without a fight. The next morning, I drove straight to my parents' house. Dad was in the garage polishing Ethan's old Mustang. He looked up when he heard my car. I wasn't expecting you. I need to ask you something. He put the cloth down. What is it? I held the property records in my hand. Why didn't you tell me you still owned the land under the diner? For a second. His face didn't change. Then he sighed. I didn't think it mattered. It matters to me. He crossed his arms. The diner is yours. The land is an investment. I stared at him. So if someone offers enough money, you'll sell it? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, if the right offer comes along, I'll consider it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've spent almost a year trying to save that place. He shrugged. It's just business. No, it wasn't. It had never been just business. Not to me. As I walked back toward my car, my mother followed me outside. Claire, I stopped. You shouldn't argue with your father, I laughed. You think that's what this is? He gave me a business he expected to fail. He kept the land. And now you're telling me I should be grateful? She looked uncomfortable. We wanted to be fair. I couldn't help smiling. Fair? Ethan got a thriving restaurant. I got unpaid bills, broken equipment, and a ticking clock. She didn't respond, because there wasn't anything she could say. When I returned to the diner, Martha was waiting. She didn't ask what happened. She could see it on my face. Coffee? I nodded. She poured me a cup, then quietly asked, how bad is it? They can sell the land, she froze. For real? I nodded. If someone buys it, we're finished. For the first time since I'd met her, Martha looked scared. She slowly sat down across from me. You know, I've worked here almost 40 years. I met my husband in booth number 3. We celebrated our anniversary here every year, or my grandson had his first birthday in the back room. She looked around the diner. This place isn't just a building. It's people's memories. I looked at her. And I'm not letting anyone erase them. That evening, I called every local bank I could find. The answer was always the same. I'm sorry. The business hasn't been profitable long enough. I wish we could help. After the 7th rejection, I sat alone in the kitchen. My notebook was open. Every page was filled with ideas. Every page except one. The last page. It was completely blank. I stared at it for several minutes. Then I wrote 4 words. Buy the land back. I had absolutely no idea how. But I knew one thing. If I kept thinking like someone who was barely surviving, I'd always be one step behind. I needed to start thinking like the owner I wanted to become, not the employee my family believed I would always be. The following Saturday, something unusual happened. Around noon, the parking lot filled up. Not with tourists, with motorcycles, at least 20 of them. For one terrifying second, I thought we were in trouble. Then the front door opened. A tall man with gray hair walked inside. He smiled. Afternoon. Got room for 20? I looked around the diner, then back at him. We'll make room. For the next 2 hours, every table was full. The kitchen couldn't keep up. I refilled coffee, cleared plates, took orders, washed dishes, served pie. Martha was laughing so hard, she almost forgot one order. When the last rider paid his bill, the gray-haired man walked back to the counter. He handed me a business card. Our club rides this highway every month. He looked around the diner. If the food stays this good. We'll be back, I smiled. We'll be ready. He nodded once. I think you will. As they rode away, Martha whispered, Claire? I think today was the first really good day we've had in years. I looked at the full tip jar, the empty pie trays, the parking lot that, for the first time, looked alive. Then I looked at the old neon sign outside. One day, I promised myself, no one would drive past this place without knowing its name. For the next 6 months, life settled into a rhythm. Wake up at 5, bake pies before sunrise, serve breakfast until noon, clean tables, balance invoices, fall asleep with the office light still on. The diner wasn't making me rich, but for the first time, it was paying its own bills. Every week, a few more people discovered us. The motorcycle club kept their promise. They came back every month. Then they started bringing friends. One family from Nebraska stopped for lunch and returned 3 months later on purpose. We planned our vacation around your pancakes, the father told me. I laughed. No one's ever said that before. He smiled. Get used to it. Little by little. The parking lot stopped looking empty. One Friday afternoon, Martha walked into my office holding an envelope. There was no return address. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a public notice from the county. My eyes immediately caught one sentence. Notice of intent to purchase adjacent commercial property. My stomach tightened. Attached was a map. The highlighted land was ours, or at least the land beneath the diner. At the bottom was the name of the interested buyer, Dawson Restaurant Group. I read it twice, then a third time. No. There had to be a mistake. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Ethan's restaurant. His restaurant looked exactly the way my parents had imagined success. Valet parking, floor-to-ceiling windows, people dressed for business lunches, everything polished, everything expensive. A hostess tried to stop me. I have an appointment. No, you don't. I know. But I'm going in anyway. Ethan was standing near the bar, talking to 2 investors. When he saw me, he smiled. Claire. What a surprise. I didn't smile back. I placed the documents on the table between us. Tell me this isn't real. He looked down, then back at me. It is. You're buying the land. I'm trying. You already own a restaurant. He shrugged. This location has potential. It's right off the highway. You don't need it. No, I don't. But I want it. People nearby had started pretending not to listen. Ethan lowered his voice. Don't make this emotional. It's business. I laughed. No. You know what business would have been? Calling me. Talking to me. Giving me a chance. Instead, you went behind my back. He leaned closer. You've done a nice job fixing that old place. But imagine what I could build there. A modern restaurant. Outdoor seating. Event space. You'd never compete with that. I stared at him, then quietly asked, so this was the plan. Give me the dying diner. Wait until I saved it. Then take the land. For the first time, he looked away, just for a second. That was all the answer I needed. I walked out without another word. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. I didn't cry. I was too angry. Not because Ethan wanted more. He'd always wanted more. What broke me was realizing my parents had known. They hadn't forgotten to transfer the land. They had chosen not to. That evening, I closed the diner early. Martha found me sitting alone in booth number 3, the same booth where she'd met her husband. Without saying a word, she slid an old wooden box across the table. What's this? Open it. Inside were dozens of faded photographs. The grand opening in 1978. Truck drivers lined up outside. Children eating pie. My grandparents standing proudly beneath the original sign. Then I found one photograph that made me stop. A little girl, about 7 years old, standing behind the counter, holding a mixing bowl. Me, I'd completely forgotten. Martha smiled. You used to come here every Saturday. I looked at the picture. I did. You loved this place long before anyone asked you to save it. I swallowed hard. I don't think I can beat them. She reached across the table and gently closed the box. Claire, they have more money. They have better lawyers. They have bigger buildings, she smiled. But they've never loved this diner. You have. And sometimes, that's the one thing money can't buy. I looked around the room. Every table, every scratch in the floor, every old photograph. For the first time, I wasn't fighting to prove my family wrong. I was fighting to protect something that had become part of me, and I wasn't done yet. That night, I couldn't bring myself to go home. I turned off the lights, locked the front door, then sat alone in booth number 3. The diner was completely silent. Only the old refrigerator hummed somewhere in the kitchen. I kept staring at the photograph Martha had shown me, the little girl holding the mixing bowl. Didn't care about money. She only remembered how happy everyone looked. Maybe that was the real reason I'd fought so hard for this place. Not because it had been given to me, because it had always felt like home. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. It was Walter Jenkins, the president of the local Chamber of Commerce. He'd been stopping by every Saturday for breakfast since we reopened. You sound tired, he said. I am. I heard about your brother, I frowned. How? He laughed softly. In a town this small? Nothing stays secret. I smiled despite myself. I guess that's true. There was a short pause. Claire? Did you know your diner qualifies as a historic business? I sat up. What? It opened in 1978. It has never changed ownership outside your family. It has historical significance for the county. I had no idea. You should talk to the preservation committee. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a room full of people I'd never met. Historians, local business owners, county officials. An elderly woman adjusted her glasses as she looked through old photographs. She smiled. I remember eating here after football games. Another man laughed. My wife and I had our first date in that third booth. Someone else added, my father stopped here every Friday after work. For almost an hour, people weren't discussing buildings. They were discussing memories. When the meeting ended, the chairwoman looked at me. Miss Dawson, this diner isn't important because it's old. It's important because it belongs to this town. She slid a folder across the table. If the property receives local heritage designation, commercial redevelopment becomes extremely difficult. I stared at her. You mean, she smiled. They can't bulldoze it. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope, real hope. The following Monday, my father walked into the diner, alone, no phone in his hand, no business suit. Just jeans and an old jacket. He looked around quietly, almost like he was seeing the place for the first time. You've changed it, I nodded. A little. He noticed the photographs on the wall, the fresh flowers on every table, families eating breakfast, truck drivers laughing over coffee, a little girl coloring at the counter. He whispered, I didn't expect this. No, I don't think you did. He looked down. I came to talk. I poured him a cup of coffee, the same coffee he'd once called nothing special. He took a sip. It's better, I smiled. So is the machine. For the first time, we both laughed. Just a little, then his expression changed. Ethan is furious. I know. He says you're trying to destroy his expansion. I looked around the diner. I'm trying to save my home. Dad was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, if I offered to buy the business from you today, would you sell? I answered without hesitation. No. What if it was enough money that you'd never have to work again? I smiled. You still don't understand, he looked confused. I don't own this place because it's valuable. It's valuable because I stayed when everyone else walked away. He slowly nodded, and for the first time in my life, I saw something I'd never seen in my father before. Regret. Not because he'd lost money, because he had finally realized. He had underestimated his daughter. 3 weeks later, the county officially approved the historic designation. The diner could no longer be demolished for commercial redevelopment. When Ethan received the letter, he called me 6 times. I didn't answer. On the 7th call, he left one voicemail. I hope you're happy. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Because for the first time, I wasn't trying to win against my brother. I was simply protecting something worth fighting for. 3 years later, Saturday mornings had become my favorite time of the week. By 7 o'clock, the parking lot was already full. Families waited outside before we even unlocked the front door. Truck drivers who had been coming for years greeted each other by name. Children ran straight to the pie display before their parents could stop them. Martha stood behind the counter exactly where she'd been standing the day I first walked in. The only difference, she smiled a lot more now. I was carrying a tray of coffee toward booth number 3 when one of our servers hurried over. "Claire, you have visitors." I looked toward the entrance, my parents, and Ethan. For a moment, everything around me faded. The conversations, the music, the smell of fresh cinnamon rolls. It all disappeared. The three of them stood there silently, looking around the diner. It wasn't the building they remembered. Fresh flowers sat on every table. Local artwork covered the walls. Old family photographs had been restored and framed. A chalkboard near the entrance read, "Welcome home." Dad slowly looked around. "I don't recognize this place," I smiled. "That's because people finally started taking care of it." He knew I wasn't talking about paint. I invited them to sit in booth number 3, the same booth where Martha had met her husband, the same booth where I'd almost given up. No one spoke for a while. Finally, Dad broke the silence. "I owe you an apology." I didn't answer. He continued, "I thought Ethan was the safer investment. I thought this place was already finished. I was wrong." Mom quietly wiped away a tear. "We should have believed in you." Ethan stared at the table. "I should have believed in you." Another long silence. Then Dad slid a folder across the table. I didn't touch it. "What's this?" "The deed." I frowned. "The land," he nodded. "I transferred it into your name. It's yours. No conditions. No payments. No contracts." I looked at the folder, but I didn't open it. Dad seemed surprised. "Aren't you going to check it?" I smiled. "I don't need to." "You finally kept your word." For the first time, I believed him. Just then, the front door opened again. A little boy ran inside carrying a drawing. He looked around until he spotted me. "Miss Claire," I laughed. He handed me a crayon drawing of the diner. Above it, in big uneven letters, it said, "My favorite place." His mother smiled. "He insisted on giving this to you." I thanked him and carefully placed the drawing beside the register. My parents watched the entire exchange without saying a word. Dad looked at the drawing, then back at me. "I finally understand." I tilted my head. "Understand what?" He looked around the room. "I thought we were giving Ethan a restaurant and giving you a burden." He smiled sadly. "But what we really did was give him a business and give you a community." As they stood to leave, Ethan stopped beside the counter. "I've been thinking." I looked at him. "My restaurant has everything. The best equipment, the best location, the biggest budget." He smiled. "But somehow, people still talk about this place." I laughed. "Do you know why?" He shook his head. "Because people don't come here for breakfast. They come here because they know someone will remember their name." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly said, "I never learned that." "No," I answered. "You never had to." That evening, after the last customer left, I locked the front door, just like I had hundreds of times before. The diner was quiet again. I walked over to the wall where the oldest photograph hung. My grandparents, standing outside on opening day, smiling with flour on their aprons. I placed my hand gently against the frame. Then I looked across the room, at Martha wiping down the counter while humming to herself, at the drawing from the little boy, at booth number 3, at the people laughing outside before getting into their cars. 3 years earlier, I thought my parents had handed me the smallest dream in the family. They hadn't. They had handed me the only one worth protecting. I switched off the lights. The old neon sign outside flickered to life. For the first time in decades, every single letter was glowing. Dawson's Diner, bright, warm, impossible to ignore. And as I locked the door, I realized something. My family had given me the place nobody wanted, but somewhere along the way, it had become the place everyone needed.